What is game design, and what does a game designer actually do? If you look it up on Google, you get multiple explanations. For example, game design is the act of deciding what a game should be, as defined by Jesse Schell. Or game design is the act of planning the entire game and translating it into actionable, understandable tasks. Throughout the years, I've created my own definition for what game design is and what a game designer actually does. To me, game design is the conceptualization and communication of the game idea to the team and the players. Besides explaining this definition and trying to make it as clear as possible for you guys, I've also tried to give you a tool that you can use to actually increase your game design skills throughout the years.
Okay, let's go.
Let's start with conceptualization. What do I mean with that? What is the act of conceptualizing? And in essence, it's relatively simple. Coming up with and testing new game ideas or mechanics. And while you're conceptualizing, your main goal is to prove that the game idea works, be it a mechanic or a full game. And this leads us to creativity. In general, a lot of people have the idea that being creative means sitting down, thinking long and hard, and getting the $1 million idea out of nowhere. Where in general, our brain is creative by creating new patterns out of existing ones. What I mean with this is that you're actually Frankensteining stuff together from your experience or what you've seen before. A good example of this is if you need to come up with a new color. If you try to do that in your mind right now, your brain is going to try to grasp at existing colors or at things you've seen in real life. And we can see this throughout history. If you look at things like the Chimera or dragons, they consist out of things that people knew back then, and they are combinations of those things, which then create a new thing. And this idea of creativity is not mine. It's been talked about on multiple resources, but good things that I would suggest you start with are watching Everything is a Remix, which is a really good video essay about this topic, or reading the book Steal Like an Artist from Austin Kleon. In general, what is important for me for you to understand is that there's nothing wrong with getting inspired, and being creative is the act of creating new things out of existing patterns. And being creative is not easy. It's an act that you need to keep doing. If you don't write down game ideas, if you're not ideating, if you're not conceptualizing, it will be harder for you to do. But the more you do it, you better get at it. And I see it as a muscle, right? If you go to the gym and you train for a couple of months, you are going to build muscle. But if you stop going to the gym, you will lose that muscle. If you then go back, you will get back to your original muscle faster, but your muscle won't come back until you actually train again. Creativity is the same. If you are busy with the act of being creative, of ideating, of kind of training that inner creative voice and listening to it, you will get better at it. If you stop doing it, the voice will stop talking to you and you will lose part of your creativity. So if you want to be good at conceptualizing and thus game design, I would advise you to always write down whatever ideas you have and to keep listening to your creative voice, to keep training that muscle. Another part of game design is knowing your market. Having ideas is great, but an idea is worth very little if you do not have existing successful patterns to draw from. I'm not saying you should do what other people do, but you should at least understand why things are working that other people are doing. A good example of this is if you would make a 3D or 2D side-scrolling platformer, and one of the things that you want to add are collectibles, because you've seen Mario use collectibles, it's really important to understand why. It's good that you're looking at the industry and you're looking at the examples that are out there to try and get inspired and try to get as creative as possible, but if you don't know why those things exist, you might be implementing them wrong. Game Maker's Toolkit has a great video on why Mario even has these collectibles, and it's good to take a moment and understand the why before you implement. Because best case scenario, your game's a huge success and you don't know why. Worst case scenario, your game horribly fails and you don't know why. Knowing why mechanics exist in the first place is a really good first step to ensuring whatever ideas for mechanics or games you have become better. Now, if we look at this from a team setting, right, I'm saying that a game designer conceptualizes. So they come up with new game ideas, they come up with new mechanics with a reason as to why they would work, and also by combining existing things out of art or other games. But why is there going to be so much time spent on actually ideating? And the main reason here is because it's really cheap. Building games is very expensive, either in time or amount of people or money. But creating ideas is actually the cheapest thing we can do before we start building anything. So the more ideas you generate and the more comfortable you get with the act of ideation, the easier it's going to be for you to create better games faster without spending a shit ton of time on building the wrong thing. And I have a real world example of this. Back in the start of my career, I worked on a small little puzzle game, and here we ideated with paper. We cut out all the mechanics in pieces of paper, and we had this puzzle grid system, and we would build the levels in this grid with these pieces of paper and playtest them before it would ever reach a developer. This would make sure that before this level was implemented, we knew that it would work. And if you have a limited amount of time and resources and you don't have a developer at your disposal at all times, these are really, really crucial things to do. If you're building your game on your own, it could make sense to just build stuff out of paper to prove to yourself that this game idea works before you write a single line of code. And that's the sole goal of conceptualizing. Prove that the game idea works. Prove it to yourself, then prove it to your team, and then prove it to the player. And each one of these layers has a different level of investment. Proving it to yourself can be a document, or it can be a paper prototype. Proving it to the team can be a small presentation explaining your findings, and proving it to the players is implementing it into the game. I want you guys to understand that whatever knowledge I'm transferring to you is always tainted by my experience. What I'm saying is not necessarily true, but it is something that has worked for me throughout my career in games. My experience is smaller scale productions. I do not come from AAA. I come from teams from the size to 10 all the way to about 50, which is small to mid-sized. Anything I'm telling you will come from that lens. If your ambition is to grow into AAA, maybe some of this will help. But if your ambition is to become an indie developer, or you want to know more about creating small projects or doing things on your own, this is most likely a video for you. Now, the second part of this definition talks about communication. And I mean communication in the broadest sense of the word. So not just me talking to you, but also in different ways. For example, communication can be the actual tickets we create to make the game. The example that we heard earlier was a game designer plans out everything in understandable chunks of information. But communication could also be a concept document. Communication could also be a level, right? Level design is a form of communicating something you want the player to do to your players. Communication can be UI. How do players interact with your game and understand what's going on? Communication can be actual dialogue. Communication can be systems, where you try to explain to the player what they should be doing and give them rewards based on this. It's a communication tool to enforce specific behaviors. So I mean communication very, very broadly. And each one of these forms of communication are a way that game designers are implemented into production. Level designers, narrative designers, UI UX designers, systems designers, you name it. And each one of them could be a whole video on their own explaining the ins and outs. And to be honest, I am not the correct person to explain that, because I'm more of a generalist than a specialist, because I've worked in smaller companies. Now, with this raw fundamental of what a game designer does and what game design is, being the conceptualization and communication of game ideas to the team and the players, let's talk about a tool you can use to get better at it.